Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about navigating the difficult relationship. From simple disagreements to emotionally abusive behaviors, you deserve respect and kindness. All the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Love and Abuse. Got a message recently from someone who wants to take a break from the relationship because they've discovered that they have emotional abusive tendencies, and they said they want to take a break and work on themselves. And wow, how often do you hear that? That's great. So I'm glad to hear that this person wants to do that. They wrote, we're both taking some time to rediscover ourselves and grow individually. I've never taken a break from a relationship, and the thought is terrifying. I never really thought I understood the point of a break, but I'm so compatible with my girlfriend, something both of us agree on. I want to fight for this relationship and fight for us because I know there's a relationship or a healthy relationship on the other side. Right now we're putting together the terms of our breakup, and I was wondering if you knew or you had a good idea of what length a healthy break is. Well, first of all, that is amazing that you are willing to look at this relationship and say, we need to take a break and work on ourselves. That is what I teach in my other programs and what I teach on this show. And I think it's so important to take a break sometimes when you just can't seem to get through the difficulties. And the reason for that is because we get so enmeshed in each other's stuff. We get triggered by their triggers. We become traumatized sometimes by their triggers. And sometimes it's just a good idea to take a step back and figure yourself out. What are you figuring out? There's two things. One, the fog has to lift. When you're away from somebody who's been difficult or abusive or toxic in any way, it's hard to find yourself because it gets so foggy in your brain and in your heart. You don't know how to feel. You can't find your way to good thoughts and good decision making and your intuition. You can't find your way to the feelings that you once had for the person. And so it gets really foggy in there. That's why I use that term. The fog has to lift. In order for the fog to lift, you have to be away from the source of that fog. I mean, you don't have to be, but that's my recommendation sometimes. Sometimes you need to take a break from the person who's creating all this fog inside your head and your heart. And when you are away from that person for a long enough period of time, the fog will lift, the fog will dissipate, and you'll be able to rediscover or actually reconnect with yourself. Reconnecting with yourself means you now know how you think. You now know what you think. You now know how you feel. You now know what you feel. So when you have clarity, then you can access your heart. You can access your brain, and you can move forward with clarity, at least more clarity. Meaning, once that fog is gone and you can think clearly and you can feel more clearly, then you have a better idea, a better grasp on what to do next. Now, this is harder when you've been in deep for a long time. In deep in an abusive cycle, in deep in any toxic situation, any difficult situation where all you've been doing for maybe years is trying to make sure you don't do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, so you're constantly focused on what you should do and shouldn't do instead of just feeling free to be yourself. That's what abusive relationships do. They take away your freedom to be yourself. So once that's gone in a relationship like this, is wondering what the other person will think and do and say, and maybe fearful of what the other person will think, do, or say. You feel the eyes of judgment. You feel the eyes of control. And it's hard to get out from under that if you've been in it for a long time, because what ends up happening, even when you take a break, is that so much of yourself inside of you, so much of that has been pushed aside or repressed, or even, I hate to say it, disintegrated. So much of that has decreased inside you. So much of you, who you are, who you were, has decreased. I don't want to say disintegrated. You're still in there. But there are times when you get out of a relationship like that who you were has changed. Because who you were has decreased so much in so many ways that it's hard to get back to that person. And when you can't get back to that person, what do you do then? That's why it's important that you recognize if that is happening inside of you. Is my ability to feel good being myself, is that going away? Is it gone? Can I be myself? And especially, who am I now? Where am I? Where did I go? And that can happen. So if you've been in it for years, that can be what it feels like. The good news is you're still in there. The possible bad news is you may have to rebuild some parts of yourself. And it's not necessarily bad news, because rebuilding parts of yourself also means you won't expose yourself to these certain behaviors and abusive situations anymore, or you won't tolerate it. Some people do, though. Some people go into the next relationship with the same circumstances and the same behaviors come out, or similar behaviors, and now they're in a similar situation. And that may be because not enough rebuilding has gone on, or strengthening of your inner self, your core, the core of who you are, what makes you. And I'm speaking in a way that almost sounds, when I think about it, if I try this on, it sounds scary. I got to rebuild myself. How do I do that? What does that even mean, rebuild myself? Well, if you lose yourself in a relationship, meaning that that strength that you had inside you, that the person you were, the person you loved being, or at least were okay with before you got into the relationship, if that person, or at least parts of that person, is gone inside of you, then the rebuilding process involves setting up who you're going to be from this point on. And that's a good thing. It's a very good thing after you've lost a part of yourself or parts of yourself. Moving forward might mean knowing what you will and won't accept in your life from this point on. Those are personal boundaries. You are telling the world, this is what I will accept, and this is behavior and words and that look that I won't accept anymore. I won't tolerate it. It doesn't mean I'm going to be awful about it. It just means I'm going to say, hey, don't do that. It doesn't make me feel very good. It feels disrespectful. It feels like you don't care about me. It feels like you don't love me. So I don't allow that into my life. I don't allow that kind of behavior in my life. I don't allow those words. I don't allow that look. I want to talk about it. And so it becomes a part of you, this strengthening. Your rebuilding is also your strengthening. But you're also rebuilding what you love about yourself and who you are in other ways. Like, hey, I used to like to read, but I haven't done that since this relationship started because I was constantly in this my guard's up mode. You know, my guard is up. I have to be careful what I say, what I do. And I lost that part of me. And so you get out of that situation. For example, this person wrote, they take a break. You start to discover yourself or rediscover yourself or rebuild, because one of those things or more has to happen. You have to rediscover yourself. You have to rebuild. You have to learn who you are and who you want to be, and even connect with who you were. And that's actually step one. You connect with who you were. Who was I before this relationship began? That's who I want to connect with. And who am I going to be and who am I not going to be going forward, whether this relationship continues or not. Whether I'm in this relationship with this person whether it continues or whether I get into another relationship or whether I choose to stay single or not see that person again. Maybe I'll meet someone else who has similar qualities, and maybe they have some bad behaviors that I need to work with and figure out and let them know that it's not acceptable in my life. These are all the questions and reflections that one would take when they're on a break. You ask yourself, what will I tolerate and what won't I tolerate? And tolerate, you shouldn't have to tolerate anything, but if there's like a little quirk or something and you can say, well, I can live with that. I mean, there are quirks that we all do, and maybe you can live with some of those quirks, but you want to be careful what you choose to tolerate and what you choose to build resilience on or about. Because you don't want to be resilient to bad behavior. You don't want to be resilient to behavior that is harmful or hurtful to you or makes you feel bad about yourself, especially. If you feel bad about yourself, then the person you're with is not doing their job as far as being a loving person towards you. Love is supporting someone else's happiness. And if you feel bad about yourself, that's not happy. That's not a path to happiness. And if they're part of the reason or the totality of the reason that you're feeling bad about yourself, then how will you be happy? And that is part of the journey in life, just heading toward happiness. Typically, not for everyone, but typically we are wired to want to feel comfortable and safe and hopefully happy, satisfied at least in some parts of life. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we do our best. We try to find people in our lives that are compatible with us or at least have similar values so we can get along. And then if we get along, then we can enjoy life together, or we can choose to be single and be happy there. And then prepare ourselves for the next relationship if we want to get into one. And that preparation is just understanding who you are and what you want in your life, what you will and won't accept in your life, and what matters to you. In a relationship or out of a relationship, what matters to you? Coming back to this person's question, that's what you're going to reflect on. What matters to me? And you can look at it from different angles, like what matters to me when it comes to arguing. Should an argument always lead to resentment, and that resentment is held over for days, weeks, months, and years? Do I want that? Because if I don't, what is my solution to that? I don't want to argue, so what's my solution to making sure I don't feel resentful? That's a personal value of mine. If and when we argue, I want to have a resolution of some sort. How do I get to that resolution? Well, first of all, neither of us can be so righteous that we refuse to listen. That's one important thing. And I listen, she listens in my relationship. And even though we feel like we are right, we will argue our point, but we will also listen when they are arguing. She's arguing her point, I'm arguing my point, and we listen. And then when we hear something, this is step 2, I guess. When we hear something that they're saying that is right, then we say, oh, good point. That's fair. You're right about that. Or whatever. It's hard to do when you're in the moment because there's a fight or flight going on and you feel very vulnerable, and what's going to happen next? Are they going to attack me when I say you're right? But that's part of strengthening the relationship, strengthening the bond, is being willing to listen and then take a step back when they say something that's valid. So that might be something you reflect on as far as when you are on your own, when you are separated. What do I want an argument to sound like? That's just one little aspect. What do I want love to look like? That could be something you think about. And the person who wrote, I know they didn't ask, well, what do I do? They asked, what's the appropriate length of time? And this is a hard question to answer because your length of time might be different than somebody else's. But here's how I look at it. I think when you are on your own, separated for a while, when you're thinking about your relationship, when you're reflecting on how you behave, how you respond, how you react, when you're doing that, I think one of the most important things is to remember the difficulties that you had in the relationship and what started those difficulties, what led to them, and how they went during the difficulties, how they resolved. For example, let's just say that, I use this example sometimes, when your partner talks to their ex, maybe they have a friendship, maybe they share custody with a child, maybe something else. But when your partner talks with their ex, let's just say that you got jealous. And this could be either person. Let's just say that you got jealous. And when you're now separated and you're thinking about this time when your partner talks to their ex and you get jealous, what are you going to do about it next time when you're together? That's what you want to think about. Those kind of things, those triggers that caused issues in the relationship. What am I going to do if I get jealous again? I don't want to get jealous. Well, what's causing that jealousy? Do you not trust your partner? Well, of course I trust my partner. Then why are you jealous? Well, what if that person tries to get my partner back in their life? There's a reason to be afraid or be jealous or be insecure about this. Well, if you have 100% trust that your partner would say the right things and do the right things if that opportunity ever came up, then jealousy wouldn't exist. You might say that's not true. I have insecurities. I have a fear of being alone, a fear of being abandoned. Yes, but if you knew for a fact, 100%, if you knew for a fact that your partner would never ever betray your trust and never be tempted by the possibility of being in a relationship with somebody else, if that was something that you never had to worry about, would there be a reason to be jealous? There might be an exception out there, but for the most part, most people would have no reason to be jealous if they trusted the person 100%. Because a person you trust 100%, you know will do the right thing for both of you. That's how trust works, is that you know they'll do the right thing. And I know there are insecurities that a lot of us have, and jealousy might be one of those things. You are afraid that somebody will do that because it has happened before. Let's just say that that's what this person is dealing with, the person who wrote to me. They would ask, what am I going to do when they talk to their ex? Well, how am I going to feel? How am I going to act? Am I going to make their life miserable? Am I going to give them that look? Am I going to give them the silent treatment like I used to do? All of those questions are important to reflect on and reflect upon as you go forward, because when you get back together, the very same situations will repeat themselves. Hopefully, the same reactions and the same triggers will not, because that's what we're trying to avoid. We want to be prepared when we get back together that we are not in that same state of mind. Because if you have a problem with jealousy, for example, and you think, well, I'll just handle it when it comes, you're not prepared. This is one of the things I talk about in my Healed Being program. You visualize yourself in the situation, so when you're back together, you have already gone through the motions. I used to do this myself when, in my last marriage, it was before that, I was in a relationship where I was young, I got jealous a lot, and that made me possessive, and that made me clingy, and all these dysfunctions. And so I had to, in order to get over that, I had to really think about why I was jealous. And is it because I believe she will leave me if she finds somebody better? And I tell you what, if you are dealing with jealousy, the person you're with feels it, they know it, they've heard you say things about it, they can't get away from it because of that insecurity. It's just so powerful in the relationship. And because it's so powerful, they don't want to deal with it. And if they don't want to deal with such a powerful insecurity, there may be a valid reason to be jealous, if you can read between the lines. Because I remember that my girlfriend that I'm talking about many moons ago, when I used to be jealous and insecure and clingy, she would want to get away from me. And of course, other people looked more appealing because they were secure in themselves. At least I learned this along the way, that she was talking to more secure people, so, secure in themselves people. And when she would talk to them, she felt better. She didn't have to worry about it. She felt trusted. So of course, she's going to move toward them and talk with them more and not want to be around me, causing a rift. I was causing this rift in the relationship so that she would feel more comfortable around other people. So that's what I'm saying, is that sometimes we are creating our own self-fulfilling prophecy by doing the thing that drives them away from us and keeps them away from us because we haven't gotten over our own stuff. And I'm mainly talking to the people who are more difficult. May not be you, but the person who wrote to me, and this is where I'm directing these words to, the person who wrote said, I have discovered that I have emotionally abusive behaviors. So I want to stop that. And so in order to stop that, while you're apart, you want to reflect on what triggers you. And the person on the other side, the person receiving the emotionally abusive behavior, you're going to reflect on those triggers. When this person becomes triggered, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? Am I going to tolerate it? Am I going to say, this isn't happening and I'm out? Or am I going to say, that happens one more time, I'm out? Or am I going to say, I hope that doesn't happen again. Let's see what happens next. That could be, but you don't want to get yourself into a situation that you were in before where it happened once. Oh, I hope that doesn't happen again, but it happens again. And you say, please don't do that again. Or maybe you don't say that. And it happens again, and it happens again. And pretty soon it's a normal thing in the relationship and you feel stuck. And of course, you're being driven away. You're disconnecting emotionally. You're distancing yourself. And then you're repressing who you are because you're trying not to trigger them. And you repress yourself more and more. And then soon you don't feel like yourself anymore. So to the person who wrote, I still haven't answered your question. I know that. But I wanted to make sure that you had an understanding of what you really need to focus on. What you really need to do is think about what triggers you. And when you are triggered, when you feel the need to say something, to want to control, to want to lie, to want to manipulate in some way, when you want to do any of those things to the person that you want to be with, then you want to make sure that you have worked on those triggers so that you don't react or respond the same way you used to respond. If it was jealousy, if it was anger because of something they did or do, if it's anger because of some past argument you never got over, if it's upset in any form about who they are and what they like and what they don't like and what they do, any and all of that has to be considered so that while you're alone, you get to reflect on everything that might upset you. And when you figure out what upsets you and why it upsets you, that's part of this healing. Why does this upset me? That's what you're going to ask yourself. Why does this upset me? And your answer will always be, well, it's because they do this, or because I don't want them to do that or think that. It's because. And when your answer involves them and not you, you're already going in the wrong direction. Your answer should be, I get this way because I blank. I'm afraid. I'm insecure. I have a history with my mom doing that to me, or I have a history with my dad, or I was traumatized as a child by this or that. But it has nothing to do, very little to do with the person you're with, unless they're abusing you. If the person you're with is abusing you, then you have other issues going on. But that's why it's also important to have an understanding of your personal boundaries, what you will and won't accept, because getting back into the relationship with somebody who has been triggering you or you've been triggered by, unless those triggers have been addressed, and unless you have visualized what you're going to do or say when it happens, how you're going to respond, then it will very likely cause a problem in the relationship again. Unless you've done some healing on it, done some work on it. I had to work on my insecurities. I had to work on my jealousy. I had to work on my feelings of the fear of abandonment and fear of rejection. I asked myself, why am I afraid to be alone? Why am I afraid to be abandoned? And these are what I call stupid questions that lead to healing, because a lot of us would feel afraid to be abandoned. Not everyone. Some people will be like, get away from me. But a lot of us have these insecurities. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to upset that person, so I'm not going to tell them the truth. Whoa, why don't I want to upset that person? Well, they might leave me. This is where you drill down into yourself. Well, why is that a bad thing if they leave me? That's a stupid question. Well, answer it. Why is it a bad thing if they leave? If they leave me, I will feel sad and lonely, and I will miss them. Well, how is it bad to be sad? How is it bad to be lonely? Why is it a bad thing to miss them? Again, these are questions that I ask myself, and I encourage you to ask yourself. They sound ridiculous, they sound obvious, but you really have to drill down into those feelings and those thoughts that you have to make sure you understand where these triggers are coming from. That's why it's about you. Every time you're triggered, it's about you, not about them. They may have been the stimuli for the trigger, but when you're triggered, it comes back to you. And it doesn't matter if you're the victim of hurtful behavior or you're doing the hurtful behavior. When you are upset about anything, what is it about that is causing the issue? And remember, I am more or less addressing the person who wrote to me who was doing the emotionally abusive behavior. Because if you're the victim of emotional abuse or any type of difficult or controlling or manipulative behaviors, it's a different story, because you're in a situation where somebody wants power over you. That's a different circumstance. If somebody wants power over you, they want to control you and mold you into the person that they want you to be, regardless of how you feel about it. That's when you listen to my other episodes. That's when you get the mean workbook or whatever and try to figure out exactly what they're doing to make you feel powerless. Really what it comes down to is that if somebody has power over you, then you have to ask yourself, what are they doing to gain that power and grow that power? And then when you ask that, you're going to discover certain responses in yourself. And this isn't to blame you for those responses. It's just to make you aware of how you respond, and how, if you continue to tolerate and grow resilience toward bad behavior, what you end up with is such a high tolerance for it that it becomes the new normal. And when you're in that new normal, you are becoming less and less of yourself. And I never want that to happen to you. And it's happened to so many people. So many people listen to this show that it has happened to maybe you as well. Or maybe you are discovering some abusive behaviors inside of you, and then you really want to stop doing those things. And the person who wrote, they say, we're going to take a break. That's a huge step forward. And they say, I'm scared as hell to take a break. And you shouldn't be, because when there's love in their heart, when there's love in your heart, when you both have that loving feeling toward each other, that almost always grows when you're both doing something to improve yourself. It almost always grows for the other person when you're doing something to improve yourself. One of the main reasons is because that person is supporting you doing something for yourself. So if you support the other person doing something for themselves, improving themselves, working on themselves, even taking a break from the relationship to become a better person, they're becoming a better person in general. And that means they're going to bring a better version of themselves back into the relationship. That is a gift. When you're able to take a break from a relationship that's been difficult, and you're both willing to accept the responsibility of improving yourself, knowing that if you show up better the relationship will improve, then the love in both people's hearts will grow stronger. It will grow stronger for each other. So when you're apart and you get to reconnect with yourself and maybe even start to rebuild some of those parts of you that you've lost because of the relationship, when you get to do that and the other person supports that, and you can both get back into the relationship being more of yourself, and certainly minus the emotionally abusive behaviors. And this is tough because when you get back into a relationship, you still discover that there are triggers that you haven't addressed yet. So I just want to give you that warning. Sometimes you will take a break and then you'll get back and you'll think, oh, great, it's still there. The emotionally abusive behavior is still there. This is not going anywhere. Sometimes you will experience that. Often, actually, you'll experience that, is that the person will heal and then they'll get back into the relationship and they'll screw up. They'll mess up badly. And then you'll think, oh, they're not healing at all. And, sometimes that can be true, but it's more often the case is that they're still discovering the triggers inside of them. And so as long as that happens less and less frequently, then you're going in the right direction. And you'll know if it's going in the right direction because the abuser no longer says what they used to say. They no longer react the way they used to react. They no longer give you the look, the look that they used to give you. They will show up in a different way. In fact, they will feel like a completely different person when they're healing because they're not being who they used to be. And that feels pretty good. And it's scary. It can be scary for some people because they look and they say, well, what's going to happen next? They look at how that person's showing up and they say, well, I really like this. I hope it's real. And if it is, that would be great, but I'm still, I still got my reservations. So I'm going to hold off on being comfortable. And it can take a long time, up to 6 months, sometimes up to a year to feel comfortable that the emotionally abusive behavior has now subsided and you feel like a somewhat healthy relationship. And if it takes up to a year, it takes up to a year, but there's always forward momentum, there's forward progress when that happens. And the progress can look like anything, a slightly longer look, a nice comment that they never made before, or when you talk to your ex, they encouraged it instead of got mad or got pouty or whatever. That is just an unusual response because you're not used to it. And so when it's unusual, you realize something's different. It's just something different. And you'll know the difference between acting and reality. Because I've heard this before. Some people will take my Heal Being program and then they'll tell their partner, I'm changing. See, this is what I'm doing differently. See, look at me. I'm changing. But then it doesn't last because they do the behaviors, but they don't actually integrate what they've learned. They don't integrate the healing. Some of them don't want to heal. They just want to do the behaviors so they can keep their power or keep their control, whatever. They just don't want to go there. It's too vulnerable for them, or maybe they just don't care. So they won't go there. In this situation, this person wants to go there. They want to reflect. They want to take the right steps. But some people don't. Some people just act. And then you'll know they're acting because it won't last. Eventually they'll get triggered again. And they will show signs. They will even say things like, can't you see I'm healing? Why are you still upset with me? They will say that if they aren't truly healing, because somebody who is truly healing, somebody who has hurt you for a long time, and they suddenly realize that they're being emotionally abusive, or you told them they were being emotionally abusive, and now they're really looking into it and reflecting on it. When they are truly healing, they become humble. They become vulnerable. And they realize all the years they've hurt you, that is the weight that they will feel indefinitely. They have hurt you so bad that they feel shame, they feel guilt, and they will be in that state. And when you're in that state of shame and guilt about what you've done to somebody else, you'll never say, "Can't you see I'm healing? What's your problem?" That's not humble. That's not humility. That's not shame and guilt. That's just get over it because I like who I am, or I don't care if you don't like who I am. This is who I am. If that's the case, then they're not interested in healing. Because I know some people listen to this show, some people take the Healed Being program and they say, okay, just tell me what to do so I can prove to them that I'm working on myself and healing. And that way they won't threaten to leave again. If that is the path, you're going to notice it. If that's what they're trying to do, you're going to notice it. You're going to see it. It's going to be obvious. And you'll be writing to me asking, well, is this what they're supposed to do? Is this what healing looks like? If you have to ask, is this what healing looks like? They're not healing. Unless you just have a chip on your shoulder and you're just super upset and super angry all the time that they've done this to you, you may not believe it. That's another part of this. You may not believe they're healing. And they may be doing all the right things, but you just can't believe it because you're going to be stuck on, if you loved me, why did you hurt me? If you loved me, why did you hurt me? I talk about that in another episode. And it's a good question. It's a highly valid, probably the number one question. If you loved me, why did you hurt me? It's a great question. And again, I talk about that in another show. And but just to appease anyone that might want to know the answer to that question, they honestly believe that you are hurting yourself. How is that possible? It's because they believe they know the right way to act. Then they're going to tell you how to do it. They're going to tell you what to do, how to be. And if you aren't that way, then you're not following their rules, their standards, and that's on you. I know what you're thinking. If they are making the rules and you have to follow those rules, then what kind of relationship is that? Exactly. It's not much of a relationship at all. It's a controlling situation that you don't want to be in. And when you're in that, and they think they're right, when you feel pain, when you are crying, they're going to blame you for not doing what they want you to do. Again, that's a deeper subject. I've talked about it in other episodes, but I wanted to hand that to you in case you haven't listened to that episode. But that's what it basically comes down to. If you're not doing what I want you to do, then it's your fault that you're hurt. That's terrible. That's what I mean when somebody is slowly disintegrating you from the inside out. They're taking you away from yourself. And you don't want that. You don't want anybody to take you away from yourself. This person who wrote, they're going to take time to themselves. Their partner's going to take time to themselves. The question, how long should it take? What is a good amount of time? The answer to that is when you feel comfortable, when you've visualized everything that triggers you and you've reflected on it and you know how you're going to respond. You're going to try it on. When they talk to their ex, how will I feel? What will I do? What will I do differently? How will I think? How will I support the other person? How can I love the other person instead of trying to control them or manipulate them? All of these things. When you feel comfortable enough inside yourself where you know you can now react differently, respond differently, show up differently, that's the appropriate length of time. That could take a few weeks. It could take a couple months. It could take longer. I think a couple weeks minimum. I think a couple months sometimes longer. Why? Because you need enough time to be away from what influenced you for long enough for that fog to lift. And so when that fog lifts, then you start reconnecting with yourself or rebuilding yourself. Fog's lifting, fog's gone. Now, who am I? Sometimes it takes a couple months for the fog to lift. So that's a tough call, but I would recommend that you don't be afraid to be apart because that is the best chance you have of staying together. Because when you stay together, the fog never lifts. I'm not talking to everyone here. I'm talking to the person who wrote. The person who wrote said, we're taking time apart and I'm afraid or I'm scared as hell because we've never done this. What does it mean? It means that you're more likely to stay together because you're actually working on yourselves. The person also said, I'm going to fight for this relationship, and I just want you to change the language. The language should be, I'm going to fight to be the best version of myself, no matter who I'm with. That should be your language. I'm going to fight to be the best damn version of myself, so no matter what happens with this relationship, I will never be the person who either does these things or allows these things in my life again. And when you do that, when you say, I'm going to be the best damn version of myself, and I'm going to reflect and heal and be humble and be vulnerable, meaning you're going to be more honest and know that some of the things that you say could be very well be relationship ending things, but you want to be honest, so you put it out there. Another show. That's a big one. But that's what you're doing. You're being humble, you're being vulnerable, and you're being honest. And then when all of that's on the table, if the relationship continues, then you have a very strong situation there, a very strong bond that will be very hard to break because it survived all that. And when you're apart, don't fight for the relationship. Fight to be the best version of yourself. If you fight for the relationship, what happens if you discover the relationship won't survive? What happens to you? If the relationship won't survive, maybe the fog lifts and the other person realizes they don't have any love left. What can happen when that happens is you feel defeated. And if you feel defeated, you don't work on yourself. You can use the relationship as your incentive, as your motivation, but never use it as the reason. Don't use the relationship as a reason to improve yourself. Improve yourself because it's a good reason to do so. And when you bring the best version of yourself into a relationship, and so does the other person, now you're doing everything to, quote, fight for the relationship. I hope this helps you. Thank you for writing, and thank you for listening to another episode of Love and Abuse. Share this with others who might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. The workbook helps you pinpoint exactly what's going on in your relationship, outlining the behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. Take the assessment in the workbook and gain clarity on what your next best steps are. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. And if you've discovered that you are doing the hurtful behaviors to someone you care about and you'd like to change that about yourself, sign up for the Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. You can take the course on your own at your own pace, or join the optional private online group where I and others will give you direct support. It's time to stop making those you love feel bad. That's healedbeing.com. And if you're looking for a safer way to listen to this show where all the titles of the episodes are changed, click on the Safe Listening button on the podcast page over at loveandabuse.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant. Because you are. We'll talk again soon.